Detective is brought to you by IDstore.com. If you're a fan of great mysteries and want to tell the world, this is the store for you. ID Store features cool products for you, your family, and friends. From My mugs to detective gear. Visit IDstore.com now and use code DETECTIVE20 to get 20% off your total purchase. ID Store. Perfect for all your holiday shopping, and you can do it all from the comfort of your home. IDstore.com. Due to the graphic nature of the content, Detective may not be suitable for all audiences.
She carried a gun in her purse. She's had her life threatened. One guy called her and said he knew what color the carpet was in the living room. Oh, that was ugly. I had to find him, which I did. But anyway, she's suffered. She has. She's still with me. I don't know why.
That's Lieutenant Kenda talking about his wife of 48 years, Kathy. If you're a detective, it's not just a job. It affects your relationships as well. You are on call 24/7. I'm Garnsey Sloan for Investigation Discovery, and this is Detective. True stories from behind the yellow tape, the ones you don't hear on TV. On this episode, Lieutenant Kenda explains what it's like when you're married to the job and married with a family.
We're still married. It makes her mad when I introduce her as my first wife, but she is, because she's my only wife. And she's a very understanding, very bright, very educated, smart girl. The hardest part for her, I think, the hardest thing I did to her, she didn't marry me when I was a policeman. I was a college graduate. I was working in a family business, which I hated with a passion, and she hated it too. And what do you want to do? We can't keep doing this. I want to be a policeman. So she was thrust into it and was thrust into the pain and suffering that went with it. There were a number of occasions when she would be cross-purposed with my work. She was a nurse, and she worked in a city hospital for a very, very long time. She was a float nurse, meaning that she worked wherever they needed somebody that day. She's very competent, so they felt comfortable in using her in every capacity, so she'd be where they needed somebody. Somebody called in sick. She would show up to replace them and then drift on. So nobody knew her name. She became that girl. It was kind of ideal for her. Nobody knew who she was. But every once in a while, she'd cross paths with one of my customers who was in there because of me. And she would have to decline caring for them. The worst occasion was that I had been not home for 3 days. She knew what I was doing was bad, but she didn't know what I was doing. I had a multiple homicide, 5 dead, awful deal. She knew I was doing that, but she didn't know anything else. I hadn't come home for 3 days. She goes to work, and here's this guy who's an orderly, just an orderly assistant in the hospital. He walked up to her, and she said, "Oh, hi." He got about an inch from her nose, and he said, "Your husband killed my brother last night." Now, she's a smart girl. She can think on her feet. She said, "Well, I don't know what happened between your brother and my husband, but what I know is that you and I worked together in this hospital for 10 years. And you and I have never had a problem. This doesn't mean we're going to have one now, does it?" And he thought about that for a minute, and he said, "No." And he walked away. Well, I didn't kill this guy. He killed himself. He was the person responsible for the 5 murders. And we confronted him in an apartment. He was contained. We're talking to him on the phone. We tell him there's no escape. We'd prefer you come outside. And he shot himself on the phone. And that was this guy's brother. So somehow he construed that to mean that I did that. So there have been times that that's crossed Kathy's path, or I've arrested her coworkers, or she's had to go into somebody's room, realize who they were, read the name, take off her name tag, and cruise back out and say, "I can't take this patient, and I can't wear my name tag." Now, there was a rule in the hospital that as an employee, you will wear a name tag no matter what. We don't want to have anybody concealed identities in here. She was one of the only ones that could get away without doing it because her name is Kenda. So they let her take it off. And then they'd reassign her to somebody else. So she suffered through all of that. She suffered through all kinds of moments like that. But after 23 years, Mrs. Kenda had reached her limit as well. I remember coming home one day soaked in blood, 10 o'clock in the morning. I had blood all over me. Kathy's at the sink. She turns around. She looks at me, drops the dish she has. It explodes on the floor. And I said, "It's not my blood. I just came home to change clothes." She says, "It's really interesting being married to you." And I said, "I guess it probably is. Now, if you'll excuse me, I got to go throw this suit away. I'll be right back." There were lots of moments like that. There was a moment when she wanted to go dancing. I'm going to learn how to country dance. And this other nurse and her husband and you and me are going to this bar. And if you have 2 drinks, the dance lessons are free. And we're doing it Friday night. And by God, you're going with me. So off we go to learn how to dance. I can't walk and chew gum, let alone dance. Anyway, we're at this place. Long story short, I meet the wife, I meet the husband. The wife tells me they're having trouble with their teenage daughter, who is a stepdaughter to the new husband, who is 17 years younger than she is, the wife. And I look at the husband and I say, "So, you're having trouble with your stepdaughter?" "Yeah." And he won't look at me. And I thought, "Oh, you son of a bitch." I grab Kathy by the thigh, and I begin to squeeze to the bone, and I say, "Kathy and I have to go now." And I put a business card in front of the mom, and I said, "You bring your daughter and you to my office tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Don't be late, and don't make me have to come and find you." And we left. The next day, I arrested the stepdad for multiple counts of sexual assault on a child and put him in prison for in excess of 20 years. So then the joke was, so what are we doing next week? We'll learn how to tango. That didn't go over well. But those things, it interferes. It does. And you can't avoid it. I mean, I couldn't. Neither could she. Is it her fault? No. Did she suffer from it? Of course. Could I have done something about it? I finally did. I retired. Before that, I really couldn't do anything. She carried a gun. She's had her life threatened. One guy called her and said he knew what color the carpet was in the living room. Oh, that was ugly. She's still with me. I don't know why. She's blue-eyed, blonde-haired, Irish, and a temper like a chainsaw, and I don't understand her, but I'm working on that. And I love her to death. And I always have. I couldn't be with anybody else. I wouldn't want to be. She has put in her dues, and so have I. And it's kind of like our turn now. We're having a great time. We deserve it, she and I, for those moments we have together now that we never had before, that we never could have before. That can Dad come? No, Dad's working. Dad's always doing something. Not anymore. Now I don't do much of anything. Everybody has to be good at something. I'm very good at being returned. I finally found my niche, as they say. I'm good at doing nothing.
Lieutenant Kenda tells the story of first meeting his wife, Kathy, at a high school basketball game and the day they got married.
I went to a basketball game with a girl. My mother had arranged this date because my mother and this girl's mother were friends. I didn't even like this girl, but deference to my mother, okay, we'll go to the basketball game. I don't like basketball either, but I thought, what am I doing here? I see this girl sitting in the stands by herself. She's wearing a brown pleated skirt and a white blouse and a brown vest to match the skirt. I remember that as clearly as if it happened this morning. And I looked at her and I thought, wow, who's that? So I leave the arranged date in the front row of the basketball game, and I go up there and talk to Kathy, and I meet her. And she said, "Aren't you with that girl?" I said, "Well, yeah, but not really." And she laughed, and we talked, and we just chatted, and that was a long time ago. And it's been, we've been married 48 years this year. We've been together since we were 15. I can't imagine it being any other way. And it seems like we've been married like 10 weeks. What? We've been married how long? Oh, come on. Well, yeah. We got married December the 26th, 1967. We tried to get married on Christmas Day, but the church was busy, something about the birth of a baby, and some sort of event was going on. So we got married the day after. Nobody remembers our anniversary except she and I because of that. It's the day after Christmas, so no one knows. There's one woman, a friend of ours, who always sends, and Kathy thinks it's funny, she never forgot. A friend of ours lives in Oklahoma. We get an anniversary card from her every year. Half the time, my kids don't send us one because they don't remember either. But it's okay. So what? I do, and so does she. It's all that matters. But that one friend of hers does remember. Always sends a card. We always thought that was funny. Never forgot.
Lieutenant Kenda was 23 years old when he married Kathy.
I was in school. I was finishing my senior year in college. It was during the break. We had time to go on a honeymoon before I had to go back to class. Her family didn't want to do it before Christmas, and we wanted to get in a honeymoon trip, that my parents wanted to provide us as a gift. So the way the calendar worked out, well, we can't do it beforehand, and we can't go too long after because then I got to go back to school. So the only way it would work is to get married the day after Christmas. So that's what we did. Went to the Virgin Islands, courtesy of my parents, who sent us there. And we had a wonderful time. Kathy learned something that she had never seen or heard of chocolate mousse before. So they offered this as a dessert in this restaurant. And she says, and she's a kid. I mean, she's like 23 years old, at 22, So was I. And I said, well, I don't know what that is. I said, well, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to order it. Well, I don't know what it is. Well, all right then, don't have any. So they bring out this wonderful chocolate mousse, and I'm rubbing it in my hair and smearing it on my face. I'm having a good time. But this is so good, Kathy, you should have ordered it. From that point on, she's ordered chocolate mousse in every place that's ever had chocolate mousse, ever since. And I still tease her about that. But it was good. She just didn't know what it was.
Before Lieutenant Kenda became a police officer in Colorado Springs, he had another job, working in the family business in Pittsburgh.
My father had a trucking business where he was a wholesaler of daily newspapers. And we would truck newspapers around to various outlets, newsstands, and what have you. Something he had done since he came home from World War II. And it was a successful business. The hours were horrible. The work was hard. I was never home. I didn't like it. My father was very dialed into money, and I didn't care about money. If I have it, I spend it. If I don't have it, I don't spend it. I just don't care about it. I wanted to do something meaningful, and I didn't think that was dragging around newspapers because it was successful. So I just didn't like it, and it didn't sit well with Kathy. I wasn't getting along with my parents. They hated Kathy because she married their son. My mother didn't speak to Kathy until they'd been married 30 years. She wanted to see if it was going to last. It was a very strange affair. So we said, you know what? Let's leave the family where they belong in our rearview mirror, and let's go west. And we did. We got to fall in love all over again, and we stopped the emotional side of the family and all the other things that go with it. I drove west in a 1970 Buick Skylark that we had purchased from her father. I put a U-Haul trailer on the back, and I put our meager possessions in this U-Haul trailer and attached it to this car, and I drove it 1,600 miles from Pittsburgh to Colorado Springs, Colorado. I saved the money for airline ticket for Kathy and the babies. But at the time, you could bring children for like a very reduced amount of money. And so that was, I thought, the best way for the kids to travel, not to suffer through a 3-day journey across the country, dragging a trailer full of junk that we owned. We didn't have very much. We rented a house in Colorado Springs. And I called her. She hadn't left yet. And I said, okay, I've got a place to live. It has enough bedrooms. But here's the deal. We have enough money for a nice sofa and a not-so-nice table, or a nice table and a not-so-nice sofa, but not both. So what do you want? I'll take the sofa. Okay, fine. So we had the sofa, and then we had your basic kitchenette sort of table, and here we are, the newlyweds, with these two little kids, and I'm a policeman qualified for federal food stamps, given my wages at the time. We agonized about money. Agonized. How are we going to feed everybody? How are we going to feed ourselves? It wasn't good. It wasn't good for a long time. Things eventually improved, but not initially. We had one car. Kathy was marooned when I went to work. She's in a strange place with two little kids. She didn't know anybody. And I'm gone. And I took the car with me. So there she is. She didn't work for the first couple of years, and we were out one night, and she said, I have to go potty. And I said, you need a job. You're going to need to take away from these kids, because now you're starting to sound like one, you know? So we worked that out, and we paid the daycare exorbitant fees, and she went back to work as a nurse. She worked part-time, didn't work full-time. I worked full-time, and we carried on. And we saved our money for college for the kids and so on and so forth, and that all worked out. They're both college graduates. My son has a master's degree. My daughter has one as well, and they're gainfully employed.
Since we're talking about marriage, we thought it might be a nice opportunity to hear from Lieutenant Kenda's better half, Mrs. Kathy Kenda. Here she describes their early days together.
Well, we were in Pennsylvania. Wasn't going good with his parents. I didn't like it mainly because he was working all hours of the day and night and not making enough money for us to survive. I'm really good at penny pinching, and I couldn't make it through the month. I had to borrow money from my parents, and I was embarrassed. We had two kids, and so one night he was out, because when he would not be home and not working, he'd be out with his friends, and I would be stuck there with the two kids. So I mixed myself some vodka and orange juice, and then I mixed some more vodka and orange juice and a whole lot more vodka and orange juice. And he came home, and I was like, this is not working. I said, you need to find another job. I don't care what. You always said you wanted to be a policeman. I don't care what we do, but this is not working. And that was basically the conversation, only with the few epitaphs and a few other things in it. So the next morning, when I woke up with a hangover, he said, do you remember what you said? And I said, would you like it word for word, or would you just like a synopsis? I said, you have a year to start working on finding another job, or I'm out of here. Kids and I are gone. And he said, you're serious, aren't you? And I said, I am very serious. So he applied. In our hometown, he applied in Ohio, and he applied in Colorado Springs because his grandparents lived in Colorado Springs, and they always used to go out there in the summer. So he got jobs all three places, and he said, I want to go west. I said, okay. He's always wanted to be a police officer. He didn't tell you his uncle worked on the state patrol, and he always looked up to his Uncle Dan. That's why he wanted to be a policeman. That's one of the reasons he wanted to be a policeman. So we went to Colorado Springs. My parents were furious because I took their grandbabies away. And I said, well, you can either have a very happy lady living in Colorado Springs with two grandkids that's married, or a very unhappy divorcee living with you with two of your grandkids. And my dad said, goodbye, see you when we see you. And so we moved to Colorado Springs, and that's how it all started. Then he got on the police department. I didn't have a job at first. My daughter was 1.5 years. She was still in diapers. And my son was 20 months older than that. So they were young when we moved out there. She was still in a crib, and he was in, one of those little junior beds and stuff. And off we were in Colorado. I didn't know a soul. And I was stuck at home with 2 kids. I'd always had a car because my dad had a car dealership, and I always had a car, and now I didn't have a car. And I was really stuck, and I was really homesick, and I thought, you can't say anything because you're the one that said we got to get out and go to Colorado Springs, and here I am, and I don't know anybody, and I'm stuck here with these 2 little kids, and I am not a stay-at-home mom. I am not a 24-hour stay-at-home mom. So I looked at him and I said, I'm going to go find a job. I said, I'm going to find a job. There are 300 policemen here. You can get a ride to work. I'm going to need the car on the days that I'm working. I will find a competent babysitter, and I don't care if I don't make a dime, but I have got to get out of here. And I did. So I went back to work part-time. Being married to him, being married to the job, it was very typical police, he worked shifts, had to keep the kids quiet. Well, at first, the shifts were 10 days on and 4 days off, and they rotated shifts. Days, swings, and mids, just like nurses do. So when he was on midnight, I had to keep the kids quiet during the day. And when he was on swing shift, they weren't there, so we had good stuff to eat. When he was on swing shift, everything kids like. And when he was on day shift, then I cooked and we had regular meals. So it was just like a routine. Everybody's into that. Lots of people are, police and fire, nurses, all kinds of people like that. So that wasn't abnormal, really, And we didn't have any money, so we had friends. We'd go over to their house. We'd play cards. He hates to play cards, but it was the only thing we could afford to do. So the kids played together. We played cards. We'd go to a movie every once in a while. We very seldom went out. It was just basically everyday life for the longest time. So, and then when he got into homicide, it kind of changed because I could never be sure that he would be home when I thought he was going to be home. His career, I knew what he was doing. He was working to get in homicide all the time. So he moved from a beat cop to a property detective to homicide detective. My jobs really didn't change. I worked 3 days a week. I had a babysitter. Kids went to the babysitter, 3 days a week, and the other days I was home. So after he got off shift, and went into homicide and went into property detective, then he worked day shift. When he was a property detective, he worked day shift and he was home at nights because they didn't do overtime. When he became a homicide detective, then he worked day shift, and anytime there was a homicide, they'd call him out and he was gone. So I always had a babysitter, whether he was home and in bed sleeping, or whether he was gone, or whether I thought he was going to be home. I never relied on him. I had a babysitter for the kids all the time when I was working. And, it just progressed on. We were, he worked, I worked. Sometimes we didn't see each other for a while. Didn't have cell phones back then, so the refrigerator got magnets that had notes on it. We'd write each other notes. I'm here. Where are you? Well, I'm going to be here. I might be home. Or he'd call home and he'd say, we just got a homicide. I'm coming home for dinner. Okay, don't come home for dinner. Goodbye. I'll see you when I see you. He'd show up. He'd come in at all hours of the night and day. I learned to sleep very soundly. The only thing that ever woke me up was the kids. Because if I waited for him and I was, I would have never gotten any sleep. I'd be walking out of the door with the kids to go to the babysitter, and he'd be walking in the door to go lay down for a couple hours. Oh, you need a shirt ironed? Tough. Iron it yourself. I hated to iron. He had all these dress shirts. There was one green one. When the green shirt came out, I knew that he was down to his last shirt. I needed to iron. So I would stand there that whole night and iron shirts. It's just very typical, just what everybody else did for, when people work and you babysit and somebody works night shift, because you don't want the kids to be babysat. It was all just, I thought it was just typical, really. You can't live your life being constantly worried about your husband is going to get killed. It's just like now, the girls in the husbands in the military over in Afghanistan. You continue with your life. The kids go to school. You go to work. You fix the plumbing. You do all this stuff. You can't, that's not on your mind 24 hours a day. It's sometimes, when you're sitting there and the kids are in bed and you're having a glass of wine, you think, oh God, I hope he's okay. It would hit you sometimes, or you would have this premonition or something like that. But you can't live your life like that 24 hours a day. You can't think about that 24 hours a day because it would drive you crazy and you'd get a divorce. So I didn't think about it. Life goes on. You just take the life as it comes.
Detective is produced by Investigation Discovery, with special thanks to Kevin Bennett, Amy Angelowitz, and Emily Kaiser. Many thanks to the best audio engineer in the business, the mighty Joe Powers. Original music was composed by the talented Chris Kennedy. Cover art was designed by Anand Galat. Sign up now at iTunes to get Detective on your feed. And join me, Garnsey Sloan, next week for the season finale. Next time on Detective.
I said, Kenda, I said, I am not waiting for you to come home anymore. I said, you are now a lieutenant. I said, you send the sergeants and the patrol people out to get these murderers. I said, you don't have to go anymore. And I don't want you to go anymore. And I can't wait for you to come home. I said, you should have called me. And I am talking at 100 miles an hour and I am crying. He's like, oh crap, I really blew it this time. And I said, that's it, I'm done. Either you send the sergeants and the patrol out to get these people, or you retire.